Before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to introduce what People's Policy Perspective is all about. This podcast is a space where we explore the policies that shape our everyday lives, but from the ground up. Instead of looking at decisions made in boardrooms or by governments, we'll be focusing on the people living with the outcomes of these decisions and who bring valuable insights from their lived experience or professional work. Whether it's mental health, education, inequality, or climate change, People's Policy Perspective aims to bridge the gap between policy and people. We want to ask, who gets a say? Whose needs are being met? And how can we create a future where everyone is truly seen, heard, and supported? Each episode will feature open, thoughtful conversations with individuals who can shed light on how policies play out in real life. And we'll dig into what's working, what's not, and what's next. So if you've ever felt like policy is something distant or disconnected from your life, this podcast is here to change that. For the youth, by the youth. Hi, Kay. Welcome to People's Policy Perspective. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. To our listeners who may not know Kay, Kay is the head of youth and family of KID, which is the first of its kind global compliance engine that makes it easy for game developers and parents to ensure the safety and privacy of kids and teens online, providing age-appropriate and market-specific feature access in more than 200 markets around the world. With a background intersecting in technology, education, and advocacy, Kay has spent over a decade supporting children and families in diverse backgrounds through creative innovation. Her projects often use creativity as a tool to address real-world issues, centering the question, will this help young people thrive in the digital world? Her work not only supports safer online environment for kids, but also contributes to a broader conversation around digital policy and advocacy. She's also the founder of MeshMinds, which is an award-winning creative technology studio and foundation that invests in games for good. Kay, it is such a pleasure to have you on. Let's get right into it. To begin, I'd love to zoom in on your personal story. What led you to pursue a career at the intersection of technology, education, and advocacy in KID, MeshMinds, and everything else that you do?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really pleased to be here. So it's been a really squiggly career journey, I must say. I started out as a technology lawyer. Along the way, I was also head of arts at the British Council because I was really interested in the art world. I also then was an entrepreneur for the last 7 years with MeshMinds, where I was looking at how can I create virtual reality, augmented reality experiences, mobile games to meet kids where they are with the latest technology, but again, get them to use that to advocate for causes that they care about, whether that was, air pollution, plastic pollution, biodiversity. So, and then the kind of recent move to KID has been over the last, say, 8 months, where I got the opportunity to work in online safety. And what sparked the initial interest for me was like the realization that it was like, wow, it's been a really amazing ride, like working alongside the UN Environment Programme, working alongside Apple, Meta, creating these experiences that get kids to advocate for causes they care about, find their tribe using technology. But at the same time, if they're not feeling safe, if they're constantly feeling like when they go online, they might be bullied, they might be scammed, they might be hacked, or they might be faced with a toxic stranger, then they're not going to be able to navigate the online world confidently and, really harness the benefits that technology can bring them. So maybe I should shift tack and think about how I can actually work with KID to then build a much safer and more inclusive internet for all future generations so that everyone can actually harness the incredible power that technology can bring to all and to enrich lives. So that's kind of like a short potted history of where the squiggly way and how it kind of, even though kind of it's squiggly, has kind of, intersected. And I must say that probably tech for good has been my kind of biggest driver all along and all throughout my kind of like more adult career. So.
Okay, that's amazing. So your why has also changed a bit and everything. But it's amazing to see how you've like ended up here today, still doing amazing work. So on a little bit of side note, I would love to learn more about MeshMinds, what it does, what its mission, your partnership with UNESCO and Apple look like. And you've also met like Tim Cook and Prince Charles. What was that experience like and what were they endorsing?
So why MeshMinds came about was I was a kind of like slightly bored lawyer at the time, and I was like, you know, having to research areas of law that I felt was really not kind of up my street. So I remember my boss was like, hey, you know, all you junior associates, you need to kind of come together and you're going to pick an industry out of a hat. And, you know, I unfortunately picked property. So I had to become the Don on property technology law. And I was like, oh, and then in doing that, though, I was like, well, what are you actually really interested in? And I'm always been really a creative person at heart, and really interested in the art world. I was like, I wonder what's going on in art and technology. And so started to kind of look around, and then was really amazed to find, this was back in, I think, 2017 when I started looking at this. And I found this really cool article on how Greenpeace had used virtual reality to double their donations. So year on year, so every year they go to Glastonbury Music Festival, and year on year they double their donations simply by putting a rainforest experience into a Google Cardboard VR experience. So really rudimentary, right? Nothing more than a kind of mobile phone, just, you know, put inside a kind of cardboard, but transported the viewer away to the forests where they were trying to raise money for. And you could listen to the sounds of the voices of the tribes people that were there, that were like, they're cutting down our forests. You could hear the sound of the kind of chainsaws. You could hear all of the, you know, the flora and fauna around you. And I was like, wow, that is quite incredible how the you know, by using an immersive media format, you can actually really grab people's attention, raise their empathy levels, educate them along the way, and actually get them to care a lot more. VR has been coined as the ultimate empathy machine. And so then I started to look at like, wow, is there a way that I can actually get involved? So I went on LinkedIn and I looked up creative technologist, and I found a guy called Dean Reinhard. And at the time he was a creative technologist working at Iris. And I literally just pinged him and I said, I'd really like to have coffee with you. And so that's literally the power of, you know, connecting with strangers. And we hit it off instantly and was like, you know, let's do stuff together. And so it really snowballed from there, because then from there I connected with the head of the Art Science Museum and convinced her that she should give us the space for free. And then that's really when everything snowballed, because I was then selecting Singapore artists to be match made with technology companies. So at the first time we had Lenovo and HTC Vive and Autodesk, and get them to create these cool creative tech experiences that were then on show at Art Science Museum. We had 4,500 people come down over 8 days. It was great. And on the very last day, Apple arrived. And I'm like, what these people from the regional product team, Apple, were like, we love what we see here, but next year, when you do this again, I was like, am I doing this again? But next year, when you do this, can we have Apple computers here instead? And I'm like, well, that's amazing. Okay, sure. And then I was also really, really so lucky, because Tech in Asia had come down to cover the first show, and they had put out a video on the internet, which was picked up by an amazing lady called Laura in the States. And she was studying sustainable development at Columbia University in New York. And she said, I saw your video about MeshMinds Tech in Asia, right? And I just love it. And I've got a fully paid internship position, and I can come to Singapore and be with you for 3 months. How about it? I'm like reading this thing like, where did you come from? She arrives. And so it's all happening at the same time, right? So Apple have said, we want to do it again. Art Science Museum said, we want to, yeah, sure, let's do it. During Laura's internship, she then, there was a day where there wasn't much going on in the office. And I said, why don't you go down to the Botanic Gardens? This is amazing photography exhibition going on. And it's all about, our natural world, etc. Who was there? None other than the Deputy Regional Director of the UN Environment Programme. And Laura walked right up to her and said, I'm doing an internship at MeshMinds. I think all of the things that, you've been saying today on the panel and all the things that you see here today, it would be so awesome if you could meet with Kay, because quite beyond photography exhibitions, in immersive media like virtual reality, augmented reality, gaming, and that kind of stuff, can be a real driver to get young people behind environmental causes. So maybe you should talk. And straight away it was like, sure. Gave Laura her business card, and it just literally snowballed from there. So by the time that then the second year did come round, and this was in 2019, but at this point we were partnered with Apple, the UN Environment Programme, and then we made this absolutely incredible showcase. So, and that's how we ended up being selected to then showcase to Tim Cook when he was doing his Asia tour, and he stopped off in Singapore, and Apple invited us to do a Today at Apple sharing session on the augmented reality experience that we'd created to get kids behind plastic pollution in the ocean. And he turned up and he took part in our workshop, and it was absolutely amazing to meet him. And along the way, how I managed to get to meet the now King Charles was that I had been selected as a woman in tech in Singapore, and just kind of recognized for the work that I'd been doing, because it was kind of quite out there, and like, nobody else was really kind of making that connection between the kind of creativity, technology, and sustainability. And so, and those are the types of things that he was interested in, speaking to people about. And so I was very luckily at the intersection of those three things, and I was chosen to meet him on his tour of Singapore. So
that is so amazing. You've met so many amazing people along the way, and it's so amazing to hear your journey and how it's just shaped along the way and snowballed like so perfectly. Yeah. So if we shift our focus a little bit to KID, and if we explore what your team is building, which is a safer space online, and how you're working to make digital platforms more equitable to young users, could you walk us through your current role at KID and how you balance accessibility, user experience, and child safety in the work that you do?
And noting that there are, though, real barriers as well for game developers and online publishers in terms of like, well, we know that there are laws, but all the laws are so fragmented and it's really, really hard to navigate them. So how do we do? So he was spending an awful lot of time working with one of the other founders who was a long time at Tencent. And together they were kind of all, working on rolling out new Tencent games, for example, but then, also coming a cropper. It's like, we can't launch in Turkey with this game, for example, because of XYZ law. It's going to be difficult, etc. So how do we get around this? Doing it on a one-by-one basis. And so the two of them together started put their heads together and thinking, well, if we could actually have this amazing global compliance database, which then brings in all of the laws across like 200 markets, and then we keep that current, that database could then, in theory, power a global compliance engine that then plugs into any game, any online experience, cross-platform, and builds that safety in by design. Because we are then enabling the developer to understand what is it going to take to then make my game compliant in Uzbekistan, in France, in Singapore, wherever it is, based on the age and location of the child. So that's kind of the B2B offering that we give, that we have for game developers, online publishers. And it is literally an API that plugs in. And then you have my section of the company, which is around youth and family engagement. Because at the other end, you have to think, well, you've got a bunch of users of these games, players of these games. And so what's their experience? Yeah. So when they go in and they see an age gate, when they are prompted to kind of, for example, if they're below the age of digital consent, to then bring in their parent or their trusted guardian, etc., to then be like, oh, could I have access to this game? Could I have consent to play this game, etc.? then what is that experience? How are we communicating that experience? How are we making sure that we co-design that experience with kids and teens at the table? How are we making sure we distill and delight online safety for all of those stakeholders, young navigators of the internet, right? So, and their families. So that's the kind of portion that I look at, and all of our kind of free tooling, but also our free education, because where we look at empowerment is very much the two-pronged approach. You cannot just empower people just with a set of tools. You're enabling people with tools, but empowerment truly comes from the combination of tools plus insights. So soon we'll be also launching a safety center, which gathers together. And the vision for the safety center is organizing the world's safety information, making it accessible and actionable for all. And we'll have to, it is a big mission, so we'll have to do it in stages. But what we've done so far is to enter partnerships with the 9 top child safety organizations, for example, Child Fund International, Save the Children, ICMEC, etc., and ask them to present what they feel are their best-in-class pieces of online safety information that they feel that everyone should know about. We will then spotlight those and then also try to make them in a remix and reimagine them as more accessible pieces. So, for example, a very long article on cyberbullying, which is very, very well researched, but is in English and is long form. Could we make it short form? Could we make it translatable into many different languages? Could we actually make it language agnostic and create a visual, whether that's an infographic, whether that's an animation, whether it's a short video? How is there another, or a podcast? What other way could we repackage that information and present it so that it helps people on their multimodal learning journeys to then absorb and act upon that information? My kids know way more than me. So let's move forward into this world, including kids at the table. When we are designing things for them, we must be designing with them.
That is so true, because the kids probably know all the loopholes and they're all going through the same loopholes and facing all the same dangers.
Yep.
And they can't stop themselves, because they wouldn't know any better. But if the companies consult the kids, then it's so much better. Yeah. Have you ever collaborated with governments or different tech companies to push stronger digital safety regulations? You're doing that now at Safety Center. Have you guys done anything else, or other than Safety Center, are you planning to do anything else?
So we are kind of we have best friends relationships with regulators, let's put it that way. So we want the regulations that are out there to obviously be enforced and enforceable to the extent that they are good regulations. We have to, at the same time, realize that not every set of regulations fits every developer, etc. So we're kind of in the business of always staying very neutral. So we are aware of what the regulations are. We are obviously, our compliance database and compliance engine helps with, the implementation of those regulations and laws, etc., because we're making it so much easier for game developers and online publishers to actually implement them and build it in as part of their architecture. But to the extent we would kind of be necessarily saying that we would be able to influence, well, it'd be nice, but we kind of, we need to stay neutral. So
okay, so have you ever worked with governments with the Safety Center or anything else?
Not yet, but obviously, kind of, I suppose, Singapore government backing our code design program is kind of one step, but certainly, there's a lot of government movement around the world, and where we would like to be positioned is to say, well, we are a leading service provider, whereby if, in fact, literally today, Ofcom in the UK has come out and said, right, we're going to have some really much more stricter rules. There should be definitely stricter age checks and all that kind of stuff. We want to be positioned whereby, a government, for example, the UK government would be like, oh, and, now that we've put out this directive via Ofcom, we should, we would like to propose that technology companies, use these types of services, which we think are really good. So it'd be nice to kind of get on the kind of like, proposed or kind of preferred list.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of like in progress.
Okay. So how do you approach ethical challenges like data privacy and targeted advertising for children, especially in this age of AI?
Making it kind of easier in that sense, and making people more aware that they don't have to just keep playing and going through experiences and just kind of being targeted, paying for experiences with their data. That is kind of our whole mantra. And so making it this kind of like seamless approach to being able to do that is one of the kind of cornerstones of what our offering is. It's extremely important to us, obviously, because Kieran is Asia's ex-top privacy lawyer, right? It's something that is absolutely in his blood, that he wants children to be able to navigate the internet without having to share all of their data, without having to just give up all of their identity in order to kind of actually have a nice time on the internet. It's not needed. And so we are very hopeful that more games and online experiences will then be like, oh, actually, let's opt in for, what a feature that's coming later this year, which is like sign on with KID. So in the same way that you have sign on with Google, we've previously had, sign on with Facebook, etc. You sign on with KID, it will be a as private as it possibly can be experience for you.
Oh wow, that's really good. That's amazing that it's coming out so soon too. You've worked with all these different technologies, and there's so many different global regulations. How do you comply? How do you make sure you're complying with all the fast changing regulations?
Yeah, so we have a great legal team who basically spend all their days doing exactly that, scouring the internet, doing all the research in relation to making sure that our global compliance database is all up to date, and that any change, even through at the country level, all the way even through to the state level as well in the United States, is constantly updated. So yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So, thinking about your journey in the next generation of change makers, what mindsets or practical steps helped you most in building this mission driven career like yours?
I think obviously a growth mindset, always thinking, you're not stuck, you're just at the beginning of the next thing. And really always thinking creatively. I think that it's, for any problem, any challenge that you may be facing in your life, always think about going, how can I turn this on its head? How can I make it into something positive? How can I see the opportunity rather than a whole bunch of negativity? So I think that, and I think that's why now more than ever, it's still so important to go back to the kind of traditional skills of creativity, critical thinking, and being able to harness those to then be able to move forward and kind of look for opportunities where others may struggle to, because they lack the creativity and the creative thinking and the critical thinking needed to be able to actually kind of look at kind of set of scenarios and then move forward. In my quest to learn more about the intersection of art and technology, which were two of my most areas of interest, I thought, well, if I can help others to do things that they might not otherwise be able to do, because I'm quite good at connecting the dots, that artist there who's really, really talented, but needs to spend time doing their art, would really benefit from an introduction to Apple, to Lenovo, to, like Autodesk, etc. How can I be that bridge for them in order so that they can supercharge what they're doing, and then I'll learn through that whole process as well, and then see where we go, right? So I think genuinely that growth mindset of like, and also always thinking, always believe in yourself. Don't let anybody tell you things are not possible, and how you therefore should never ever put yourself inside this little box of like, no, well, I'm no good at that, or I can't do that. I had no formal training ever whatsoever in anything related to virtual reality, augmented reality, mobile gaming. And yet I was able to create a creative technology studio that became award-winning, that had an MOU with the the United Nations Environment Programme for 4 years. I'm like, that's because I used technology to reach out to people who could fill my gaps. Interested in those things, but I can't be the expert. But if I can empower others to be the expert and sit really close to them, then I can learn along the way. And then we go forward together, right? So the journey isn't supposed to be alone, right? The journey is much better when you go with others. And those others can be complete and utter strangers to you, as long as you feel that you present yourself as being someone that can also add value to them, that you're not taking anything. I wasn't taking anything from them. I was giving them opportunities and new experiences to work with these technology companies to then, so for example, what Autodesk sponsored was a whole bunch of young artists to go and use their huge 3D printers. They taught them all that 3D modeling, etc. So those who were otherwise fine artists were suddenly able to create things in 3D and bring their 2D things to life in 3D. It's amazing, right? I'm like, so it's all about really finding your tribe and then going on that journey with others,
That is so true. I feel like I really resonate with what you say about not confining yourself, because sometimes I feel like, oh no, I can't do this. Like it's going to be too hard. But then I do it and then I'm like, but I could and I can. So that really resonates with me.
Cool.
So as more young people enter into the tech world, what type of leadership do you believe is needed the most that can shape the industry responsibly?
I look forward to a time when the young people of today are the leaders of tomorrow. I think that people will be more aware of issues like diversity, issues where we should be more inclusive, issues where we should raise up young voices and not keep this kind of old traditional mindset of like, well, it's only the elders who know best. I think in today's world, that's changed. And not to say that, older, more experienced people should be completely sidelined at all, right? Because that's, again, similarly ageist too, right? Like, oh, you're too old, etc. But there just needs to be a better balance, right? And I think for a long, long time, we haven't focused so much on young voices, to our detriment. And in this very fast-paced world, made faster and faster every single day by technology, the real leaders need to be those who can actually then harness the power of that technology. The leaders of tomorrow need to also really think, how do we best harness technology? How do we raise youth voices? How do we make everything as inclusive as possible? And I look forward to that time. I think, though, I'm still very sobered by the statistic from, I think it was the World Economic Forum, that said we've got still over 130 years to reach gender parity in the workplace.
Oh,
with the best will in the world, women are still going to have it hard for a really, really long time, well beyond, unfortunately, the lives of you and I. And so I hope that people don't give up that fight. It's really important to have diverse teams, and that relates to not only genders but also cultures and different abilities, etc. Because when you have people with diverse mindsets and backgrounds, that's when true innovation can take place, because it's they come to the table with their own perspectives of the world and say, well, actually, this needs to be taken into account when we're designing this new platform, this product, this game, this online, whatever it is.
That is true, because with all the internet and ChatGPT, everyone's getting fed one answer. So there's one way to think, and then everybody has one perspective. That creates no diversity.
That's right.
And I'm waiting for the day we also have gender equality. Kay, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story, your work, and all of your wisdom. The way you combine your creativity, your technology, and your policy to serve young people is incredibly inspiring. And it's such a powerful reminder that thoughtful innovation can really lead to meaningful change. And to everyone listening, thank you so much for being here with us on People's Policy Perspective. And if you've enjoyed the episode, don't forget to listen again to the next episode and share with everyone you know. Take care, and we'll see you next episode. Bye.
Bye.